Hello, welcome to week 3. We are moving along and talking about philosophies and our introductions to philosophies. Last week we were talking about philosophies of mind and epistemology and how one goes about stating whether or not they exist, how they know they exist. This week we're moving a little bit more towards consciousness and trying to figure out what it means to be conscious, to have not a conscience, a consciousness, to recognize what this means, that you can see yourself or you can understand yourself. Before we get too far, I want to go ahead and start a little video and have us watch this together. You may not watch the whole thing, just part of it. This video is coming from a couple years ago when a whole lot of people were out in the streets protesting the current administration's policies on immigration, the ways that this current administration has hunted down and pushed out and blocked borders of who is allowed. And there should be a direct connection right now for you in our reading to the Ansatula reading and figuring out what a Mestiza identity is. So I want to watch this video for just a moment, and then we will come back to it later. So I got to share my screen. And we'll watch for a moment.
Show me what democracy looks like.
Justice. You are the ones. We need some people to show love when others are showing hate. You are the ones.
Okay, free this administration, y'all. Day to day, they're just doing and this one really okay.
When people are being physically held and deprived of their liberty and their legal right to seek asylum, I think it's really important for us to show up.
There's a couple who live in Sydney. What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! We all are here.
So we'll go ahead and stop that video right now. You can check it out yourself. I will provide links in our Moodle page. You may not remember, because it was a whole 2 years ago, what some of the things, or maybe you weren't paying attention at the time, and you didn't know what was going on. But a couple of years ago, actually from the very start of the administration, the Trump administration went very hard after immigrants, after people who were seeking asylum, after people who were trying to come into the country. Of course, they went out very hard over a certain class of people who were coming from our southern border into the country. There wasn't a whole lot of lockdown of the Canadian border. I don't mean for this to already start in the political, but of course philosophy is always political. What was undeniable, hopefully, I hope you will agree with this, that this is not a controversial opinion. What was undeniable was the fact that our nation could resort to putting children into cages apart from their families. Babies and children separated from their mothers and fathers. The fact that we could do that, I think we've got some questions on what existence means and whose existence matters. We're going to move now to talk a little bit about the philosophies that we've read and why they matter. I want to start by pointing out we have a textbook. Hopefully, you've got it because two of our readings this week came out of the textbook. Two of our readings last week came out of the textbook. I hope you've purchased it. I hope you're holding it in your hands. It is possible that you could have bought a digital version of the book, but the physical book matters. It is matter. I mean, I can taste it. I can smell it. I can feel it. I can see it. Can't really hear it unless I just do that. It's a piece of matter, and it's material. It is real. I could have taught this course, and it's often I do teach courses without making you order a book, without making you pay for one, and that's a really good choice for me to make. I prefer to not have you have to purchase a book. In my English 131 course this semester, people did not have to buy a book. However, one of the things that I've discovered is that as far as feeling connected to this course, as far as feeling connected to school and to college, in this COVID era when we are all online, watching each other, reading words, I think we've got a real problem of the material world and the immaterial world. What feels real and what are we questioning? I had you buy a book because it's a philosophy course, so it's very text-based. And I think a real live book makes the experience of reading philosophy much deeper. And I'll just give you an example. Yesterday as I was studying, I was reading our PDF of the Ansel Dua piece on my phone because I was doing something else with the kids, and so I was reading on my phone. And, there's just a real difference between reading something on your phone and reading the pages. I don't know if you can see my pages, where you can actually physically highlight, where you can write in the margins, where you can feel the pages. For me, there's a real difference. Of course, I grew up in a much more material era than you. The whole point of this is I want you to think about materiality and immateriality. What you can feel, sense, smell, taste, hear, that physical world versus the unphysical world, the world of what happens in the mind. Let's take an example. Here's a balloon. The balloon, we can see it, we can feel it. It has substance. It is real. It makes sounds. We can play with it. We have a very real experience of this balloon. The state of a balloon can change fairly quickly. Where's the balloon? It's like my little magic trick. Now, of course, we have a remnant of what used to be, but is this still a balloon? Or is this just a piece of rubber, a piece of debris? What is this? What we have here is a basic problem of what is the material world, what is real, and what is the immaterial world? Is the concept of a balloon something real? Did it exist a moment ago? Or is it just an idea that took some kind of shape for us that we can put a label to, but now that it's gone, it no longer is? Why are we talking about material and immaterial? Well, we're trying to figure out what consciousness is, what the meaning of being is, how we know we are. I don't know why I'm playing with my knife. We're trying to figure out how we determine the purpose and the meanings of consciousness. Let's stop for a second and recap. Where are we? Well, we have a consciousness, we have a mind, we exist. That's Descartes. Ryle comes along and says, well, no, wait, we are behavior. Our bodies and our minds work together in the world. They're physical. And then Chalmers comes along and says, now, wait a minute, there's a problem with consciousness here and how we determine what we are scientifically and how we talk about it together. And then Ponte says, well, we obviously are in relation together, that there's a material experience even as there's a personal interiority. Where does Andalusia come in? Anseldua, sorry. Where does she come in? Well, Anseldua comes in by saying, you know, Descartes, dude, you think you are the person who can establish reality for all of us. You think, therefore, you are. Hot shit for you, man. Cool. Awesome. You are. But what about me? Ansel Dua says people like her, people who are uh, not the majority, people who are not uh, male, people who are queer, people who work in the fields, people who are indigenous, people who are without power. Those people do not get to say, "I think, therefore I am," because nobody gives a shit. Nobody listens to them. Nobody sees them. They don't exist within the world. And all you have to do is go back and look at TV, even today, where we have many more characters of color, we have many more characters of sexual diversity. We've got lots of things going on TV shows and in the digital era. Even today, the mass amount of representation in TV and movies and media is white, middle class. The primary character, the that sympathetic character that we follow in most stories is male. White, middle class male. And obviously, I'm saying that. I don't know if you can see. Even though my face gets blotchy and my lighting is not always good. I'm a fairly white guy. White, middle class male. And Ansel Dua comes along and says, you cannot just tell us that you think and you exist and everything's dandy. It is not that. And frankly, you can't just tell us that our experiences are mediated between each other and that we recognize self through others, because I don't get recognized as an indigenous, queer, feminist, Latina, poor woman. I don't get recognized. Women like me don't get recognized. And so Ansel Dua says we have to come up with a different set of consciousness, a new idea of consciousness. And this idea of consciousness is not just for her, and it's not just for people like her, and it's not just for people of different identities that are similarly not seen. This idea of consciousness is now the essence of consciousness, the Mestiza. What is the Mestiza? The Mestiza is an alien consciousness, presently in the making. It is a forming, evolving consciousness, a new Mestiza consciousness, una conciencia de mujer, a consciousness of woman. It is a consciousness of the borderlands. So for Ansel Dua, and we're going to read a little bit more of this. For Ansel Dua, this consciousness is a consciousness that exists in flux between the different states of being, the different material states of experience, of being indigenous, of being queer, of being woman, of being Latina. Those all have different borders around them. We want to think that a Latina is just this, or a person who has a queer identity is just this, or a person who is indigenous is just this. But because Ansel Dua exists in all these different states, she is in a state of flux, or what she calls ambiguity. How does she begin to recognize this state of flux or ambiguity? Well, she recognizes it through defiance. It grows out of this sense of self who is in defiance to a very white Western sense of self. You think, therefore you are. You are a body. You exist. What happens when that body is completely ignored? When it can be driving along and somebody can come along and put a knee on it and kill it just because they do want to? Or what happens to that body when it can be locked up in chains and enslaved? Does that body exist? Is that really a body? We can go back to Frederick Douglass, who said, I recognized that literacy was a way of finding self, of finding my mind. It's a way of freedom. He had to recognize that it was within his own power to find freedom. Ansel Dua is saying, your definitions of consciousness don't work for people like me because you don't recognize people like me. And so because of that, the Mestiza has to form. The Mestiza comes from the ambivalence of the clash of voices, and it results in mental and emotional states of perplexity. Internal strife results in insecurity and indecisiveness. The mestiza's dual or multiple personality is plagued by a psychic restlessness. It's hard for me to conceive it. I mean, I know of it. I know people. I don't want to do the I've got a black friend thing, but I love people who have experienced this state of ambiguity. I've listened. I've tried to become a part of, or at least a supporter of, this world of ambiguity. Many of my students come to school or log on in a state of ambiguity. But I don't know it. For me, I don't have a problem walking down the street. If I'm driving along the highway and I see a cop car, my butt cheeks don't clench naturally unless I'm going 80 miles an hour. I'm certainly not afraid of getting pulled over and getting killed. And I'm not saying all cops will kill you. For Ansel Dua, this ambiguity and the defiance that grows out of it, the hatred, the anger, the demand that you pay attention to us. For Ansel Dua, this state of existence moves into a need for action, a call to stand up and change, to demand, recognize me, see me, I am here. At some point, on our way to a new consciousness, and when she's using the word we, she is meaning the mestiza. Okay, she's not meaning just Latinas or just queer folk or just indigenous folk. She is saying the mestiza, this mix of identity. At some point on our way to a new consciousness, we will have to leave the opposite bank, the split between the two mortal combatants, those who are saying, we exist, we are power, and those who say, you're hurting us. We have to leave the opposite bank, this bank of people who are powerless, between the two mortal combatants, somehow healed, so that we are on both shores at once, and at once see through the serpent and the eagle eyes, and perhaps we will decide to disengage from dominant culture, write it off altogether as a lost cause, cross the border into a wholly new and separate territory. There's a great book, by the way, called Parable of the Sower that talks about this kind of idea of separating yourself from this dominant culture into a whole new reality. Or we might go another route. The possibilities are numerous once we decide to act and not react. The power of the mestiza is the ability to say, we'll work with you. We'll try to help you understand that there's a new reality here. But if you can't understand it, we're leaving, man. We got our own reality. Screw you. As a mestiza, this is on page 102. As a mestiza, I have no country. My homeland casts me out. Yet all countries are mine because I am every woman's sister or potential lover. Dominant culture may cast a mestiza out, may not recognize mestiza. And yet, all countries, all dominant culture is the mestizas. She exists in all of them. As a lesbian, I have no race. My own people disclaim me. But I am all races because there is a queer of me in all races. I am cultureless because as a feminist, I challenge the collective, cultural, religious, male derived beliefs of the Indo Hispanics and Anglos. And yet, even though those people don't recognize me, I am culture because I am participating in the creation of yet another culture, a new story to explain the world and our participation in it, a new value system with new images and symbols that connect to us and to each other, to the planet. Soy un amasam, sorry, amasamiento. My Spanish is bad. I am an act of kneading bread, bringing it together, bringing together the different particles that make up bread. I'm in an act of kneading. I am the act of kneading, of uniting and joining, that not only has produced both a creature of darkness and a creature of light, but also a creature that questions the definitions of light and dark and gives them new meanings. I am this person of ambiguity and collectiveness and change and reaction and defiance. I am this thing that comes in the middle between all the borders of who you think we are and who you are and what you think this society is. I am this mestiza, and I give things new meanings. We are the people who leap in the dark. We are the people on the knees of the gods. In our flesh, evolution works out the clash of cultures. It makes us crazy constantly. But if the center holds, we've made some kind of evolutionary step forward. Nuestra alma el trabajo, the opus, the great alchemical work, spiritual mestizaje, a morphogenesis, an inevitable unfolding. We have become the quickening serpent movement. For Ansel consciousness is not simply thinking and being. Consciousness is not simply your physical experience and your mental experience. Consciousness is not about just establishing a baseline of experience and then talking about all the rest. Consciousness is this thing that brings together everything and steps outside of these dual binary ideas and makes us recognize the entire person, the entire world of experience. And it naturally has to be dominated by that person who can exist in this ambiguity and lead us into a new world. For Ansel, who is, I'm looking through my notes, finding my thing. Aha, there it is. For Ansel, who much of the world, much of Western culture, much of our culture will look at and say, well, what are you? For Ansel, who much of our culture will say, put in a cage, shut them out, lock the border. For Ansel, the Mestiza, grows, develops, and makes us recognize that consciousness is something different. Consciousness is a reality that we may not understand until it becomes apparent in front of us, until somebody stands up and says, this matters. For Ansel, the Mestiza is material, and white definitions, Anglo definitions, those in power, rich definitions, straight definitions, those definitions that want to say, this is the dominant, this is standard, you are not standard. That becomes the immaterial, the meaninglessness.
Saw a monster in the mirror when I woke up today. A monster in my mirror, but I did not run away. I did not shed a tear or hide beneath my bed. Though the monster looked at me, and this is what he said. He said, wubba, 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 woo, woo, woo. Wubba, 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 and a doodly doo. He sang wubba, 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 so I sang it too. Told the monster in the mirror, no, I am not scared. Then I smiled at him and thanked him for the song that we had shared. Well, the monster thanked me too, he smiled right back, and then the monster in the mirror sang his song again. He sang wubba, 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 woo, woo, woo. Wubba, 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 and a doodly doo. He went wubba, 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 and I sang out loud. This wubba, wubba, wubba is a monster song. Wubba, wubba, wubba is a monster song.
All right. I think we'll stop there. I mean, obviously, we could get a whole lot of philosophy out of Grover and being a monster in the mirror. And in fact, that song is often used to talk about, sorry, dogs. That song is often used to talk about our experience of who we see in the mirror and who we feel we are. It is a very philosophical song as far as determining how we know who we are. It's usually a positive message. Obviously, it's Sesame Street. It wants to say, you know, you may feel uncertain about yourself, you may feel bad about yourself, but really, who you see in the mirror is just part of who you are. There's also this baseline you. When I hear Ansel Dua critique white, middle class, rich, or wealthy culture, when I hear her critique dominant culture, to straight culture, or when I hear other people critique it, again, I'm pretty white, I'm pretty male, I'm pretty straight. I don't know that I'm 100% all those things, but for most part, my identity, I identify as those things. And when I hear these critiques, it makes me wonder, who is this monster in the mirror? Am I that monster? The beautiful thing about Ansel Dua, I think, is, and I think there may be people that would disagree with this reading of it. The beautiful thing about Ansel Dua is that she is inviting everyone into the Mestiza. To recognize your own borders, to recognize your own spaces where you can become a part of this. To recognize that this white middle class dominant male self, white middle class male straight dominant self, white middle class male straight American self who feels like I am the thing, I am the standard. This is not the standard. It's not, I think, therefore I am. It is, we are, we exist. You can think about that and join us. When somebody stands up and says, Black Lives Matter, it is not an erasure of me. It is not an erasure of my existence. Of course my life matters. Black Lives Matter